Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 2. In today's episode, we explore Chapter 14 of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, titled The Sixth Sense and Invisible Counselors. Here, Hill introduces the final step to riches, a higher faculty of insight and intuition that connects us to infinite intelligence, and to the kind of guidance that can shape lives, legacies, and ideas far beyond reason. Okay, so let's dive into this final and, well, maybe the most fascinating principle in Hill's whole philosophy, the sixth sense.
He really does position it as the absolute peak, doesn't he? The summit where everything else leads.
Yeah, the 13th step. He calls it the door to the temple of wisdom.
That's right. And it's really important to understand Hill's point here. This isn't step one.
Yeah.
He's very clear. You can only really grasp this, let alone use it, if you've genuinely put the work into mastering the first 12 principles.
Right, all the stuff about desire, faith, planning, persistence.
Exactly. This is the refinement. It builds on that foundation you've hopefully been working on.
So it's the capstone, definitely not the cornerstone. You need that groundwork. Hill says this sixth sense almost defies description. So how does he try to describe it? What's he actually pointing at here?
Well, he frames it as a part of the subconscious mind. Specifically, the bit he calls creative imagination.
Okay.
Think of it less like deliberate thinking, more like a receiving set. That's his term.
A receiving set. For what?
For ideas, plans, thoughts that just seem to, flash into your mind, he uses words we'd recognize: hunches, inspirations.
Okay, so that gut feeling, that sudden insight, you can't quite explain.
Yes, but for Hill, it's deeper than just gut feeling. He really believes it's the direct link, the medium of contact between our own limited mind and what he terms infinite intelligence.
Infinite intelligence,
Right.
that big concept from earlier chapters.
Precisely. It's where the mental and the spiritual kind of merge. The contact point between your mind and this universal mind.
And he insists you can't get it without the earlier steps.
Absolutely. He argues that without the internal development you get from applying the other principles, you just lack the knowledge and experience to truly get what it is or how it works.
So understanding comes from inside through practice, like meditation.
Yes, internal development, meditation, focused thought, not just reading about it. You have to cultivate the soil first, so to speak.
Makes sense. Okay, but what's the payoff? What does developing this sixth sense actually do for you, according to Hill?
He lists some pretty significant benefits. He claims that with its help, you can get warnings about dangers before they hit so you can avoid them.
Like an early warning system?
Kind of. And also, you can get notified about opportunities right when they appear so you can grab them.
Okay, that sounds useful.
He even uses some quite evocative language. He says it brings the aid of a guardian angel, someone who will open that door to the temple of wisdom just when you need it.
A guardian angel. Wow. That sounds almost, like you said, beyond reason. Like a miracle. Does he go there?
He actually addresses that head on.
Yeah.
Hill says he doesn't really believe in miracles in the sense of nature breaking its own rules.
Right.
His view is more that some natural laws are just so far beyond our current understanding that they look like miracles to us.
Okay, so it's about our limited perspective.
Exactly. But he does say the sixth sense comes as near to being a miracle as anything he personally experienced.
And why? Because he can't explain it.
Pretty much. He admits he doesn't fully grasp the how of it, just that through his own experience, he knows it works. It delivers.
That's a key distinction. Grounded in personal experience, even if the mechanism is, well, mysterious. And his core belief behind all this.
His absolute bedrock belief, which he emphasizes comes from his own experiments, is that there's this universal power, call it a first cause, intelligence, whatever, permeating everything.
The force behind acorns becoming oaks, gravity, all that.
Yes, and he is completely convinced, based on his life, that you can tap into this infinite intelligence, that through applying these principles, you can induce it to help you transform your desires into reality.
Into their material form.
Right. He says he knows it's possible because he did it. He experienced it.
Okay, so the sixth sense is the connection point, bringing this deeper guidance. But how do you actually cultivate it? How do you tune that receiving set? This leads us to his invisible counselors, right?
Yeah.
Which sounds unusual.
It definitely does sound unconventional. This was Hill's very personal, very deliberate method for developing this faculty. He said it grew out of his habit of hero worship.
Hero worship.
Yeah, admiring and wanting to be like great people. He found that really trying to emulate his idols, having faith in that imitation, gave him greater capacity for their positive traits.
Interesting. So he decided to systematize it.
Exactly. He decided to use this deliberately to reshape his own character. He felt he needed what he called a voluntary rebirth to overcome some limitations he perceived from his early environment, ignorance, superstition, that sort of thing.
So he built himself a kind of personal dream team from history.
That's a great way to put it. He chose 9 men whose lives just blew him away. Emerson, Paine, Edison, Darwin, Lincoln, Burbank, Napoleon, Ford, and Carnegie.
Wow. That's quite a lineup. Imagine getting them all in one room.
Right. A very diverse group.
So what did he actually do? How did these meetings work?
Every night, just before sleep, he'd hold these imaginary council meetings. He'd close his eyes, visualize the 9 men seated around a table, and picture himself as the chairman.
And the goal was specific.
Very specific.
Mm-hmm.
His stated purpose was to rebuild his own character into a composite of their best qualities. He really understood the power of focused thought and desire in shaping who you are. He saw self-suggestion as the key principle for character building.
So these nightly meetings were his intense application of self-suggestion.
Exactly, like programming himself using these historical figures as models for the treats he wanted.
What happened in these imaginary sessions? Did he just sit there or?
No, he actively engaged. He would address each counselor audibly, out loud, asking for specific qualities he admired in them.
What?
He'd ask Emerson for his deep understanding of nature, Burbank for his harmony with plants, Napoleon for inspiration and resilience, Lincoln for justice and patience, Carnegie for organizational genius. You get the idea.
And he really studied them first.
Oh, yes. He stresses he studied their lives meticulously. He wanted to truly grasp what made them tick, what their specific strengths were. It wasn't just wishing, it was targeted emulation based on deep study.
Okay, grounding it in their actual lives.
Hmm.
And then things got weird.
Huh. Well, yes, this is where his account gets really interesting. He says after months of doing this every night, he was astounded because these imaginary figures started to seem apparently real.
Apparently real, what does that mean? Just vivid imagination or something more?
According to Hill, it felt like more. He says they developed distinct personalities and habits that actually surprised him.
Like they took on a life of their own.
That's the impression. He gives examples. Lincoln was always solemn, slow-moving, often late to the meetings. Burbank and Paine were witty, cracking jokes. Napoleon reacted to things like a strategist, sometimes disapproving of the levity. It was consistent with their known characters, but felt spontaneous to Hill.
That is strange.
Yeah.
Compelling. Can you share one of the anecdotes he tells?
Sure. There's one where Burbank arrives late, excited about grafting experiments, which leads Paine to make a witty remark about apples and snakes, drawing in Darwin and Emerson, until Napoleon dryly comments on apples and statecraft. It suggests real interaction, not just Hill puppeteering them.
So it felt like they were responding, not just him talking at them.
That's certainly the experience he describes. And he details a couple of moments that felt incredibly direct. One night, he says, Lincoln stayed behind after the others left.
Okay.
Lincoln supposedly leaned across the table, then walked over, put a hand on Hill's shoulder, and gave him advice about needing courage and trusting the common sense of ordinary people in tough times.
Wow. Regardless of the source, that's powerful advice. What was the other instance?
It involves Thomas Edison. Hill claims Edison showed up early one meeting and told him he was about to learn the secret of life.
The secret of life.
Okay. Edison apparently described life as these great swarms of intelligent energy units, like bees, drawn together by desire, attracted to friendly, resonant desires.
That's a very specific concept.
Right. And Hill was so struck by this, he actually went to see the real Edison, who was still alive then, and told him about this dream.
And Edison's reaction.
Reportedly, Edison just smiled and said something like, "Your dream was more a reality than you may imagine," but didn't explain further.
Whoa, that link. And Edison's cryptic response.
Mm-hmm.
It's really uncanny. No wonder Hill got spooked.
Exactly. He actually stopped the meetings for several months. He said they became so realistic, so uncanny, that he genuinely feared he might lose his grip on reality, lose sight of them being imaginary. He used the word afraid.
Understandable. What brought him back?
Another very vivid experience. He describes it as possibly a dream, maybe a waking vision. Lincoln appeared at his bedside.
Lincoln again.
Yes, and this time, Lincoln urged him forcefully to finish writing his philosophy. He warned that the world was heading into chaos and losing faith, and if Hill neglected his mission, there'd be serious personal consequences, setting him back millennia in his development.
That's some serious motivation, a stark warning.
Definitely. So he resumed the meetings the very next night.
And how did that first meeting back go?
He describes the whole cabinet filing in, and then Lincoln supposedly raises a glass and proposes a toast. Gentlemen, let us drink a toast to a friend who has returned to the fold.
Wow. Talk about a welcome back. It just deepens the sense of something profound happening, at least internally for him.
Yeah.
And he didn't stick with just the original 9, right?
No, eventually he expanded it massively, added over 50 historical figures: Christ, Plato, Newton, Socrates, Galileo, Copernicus,
Yeah.
a huge council. It became an ongoing source of internal consultation for him.
Now, Hill was apparently hesitant to share this whole invisible counselors thing initially. Why do you think?
Well, he says himself he knew he'd be misunderstood. I mean, let's face it sounds pretty out there, right? Like fantasy or maybe something psychologically concerning to some.
Yeah, you can see why he'd pause.
He says it took him years, gaining maturity, to find the courage just to tell the truth about his experience, regardless of how people might react. It's a vulnerable thing to share.
But he always maintained they were imaginary.
Yes, he's careful to state that. He says, while the members of my cabinet may be purely fictional, but then he immediately emphasizes their incredible positive impact.
What kind of impact?
He credits these meetings with leading him on glorious paths of adventure, deepening his appreciation for greatness, firing up his creativity, and making him bolder in his thinking. So whether you label it psychology or something else, he saw concrete, positive results.
And this ties directly back to developing the sixth sense.
Yeah.
How did the counselors help with that?
He makes a very direct connection. Hill states flat out that it was during these imaginary meetings that his mind was most open, most receptive to the ideas and insights coming through the sixth sense, the inspiration.
Ah, so the meetings created the right mental state.
That seems to be it. He gives full credit for the inspired ideas and knowledge he received to these invisible counselors. The process itself seemed to tune his receiving set.
So it evolved from character building to active brainstorming or problem solving with his internal counsel.
Exactly. He says this influence guided him through really tough times, even life-threatening emergencies. The initial goal was self-improvement, but it became a way to seek counsel on challenges for himself and his clients, often with, in his words, astonishing results. Though he adds he didn't rely only on this.
Okay, so who is this really for? Is the sixth sense something everyone pursuing the book's goals needs?
He clarifies this point. He says, while the book's principles can help anyone build wealth, this specific chapter on the sixth sense is most relevant, most beneficial for those aiming really high, accumulating vast fortunes, or achieving major influence.
Not necessarily for someone just wanting a comfortable income.
According to Hill, not essential for more modest goals, especially if it's purely about the money. He sees it more for the empire builders, the big thinkers, the visionaries.
Like the historical figures he admired.
Precisely. He points to leaders like Ford, Edison, Napoleon, but also spiritual figures like Christ or Buddha, saying they all understood and used this faculty. He felt it was a key part of their greatness and impact.
And is it like flipping a switch? You master step 12, and boom, sixth sense activated.
Definitely not. Hill is very clear. This ability develops slowly. It's not quick. It matures through the consistent, dedicated application of all the other principles over time.
He mentions age too, right?
Yes, he makes an interesting observation there. He says it's rare to be able to use it effectively before you're 40, and often it doesn't fully kick in until you're well past 50.
Why the wait? Why does age matter?
His reasoning is that the related spiritual forces, which he ties closely to the sixth sense, just need time to mature. They require years of meditation, deep self-reflection, serious thinking. It's not a weekend workshop skill. It's cultivated over decades.
Okay, so you can get rich using the first 12 principles.
Yeah.
But the sixth sense chapter is included for the bigger picture.
Absolutely. He put it in there for the complete philosophy. Because the book ultimately isn't just about money, even though it's famously effective for that. It's designed as a guide to achieving whatever you truly desire from life.
Going beyond just wealth.
Right. The journey starts with that intense desire, but the end goal, the real destination, is a kind of knowledge that leads to profound understanding. Understanding yourself, other people, the laws of nature, and ultimately finding real happiness.
And he believes that deeper understanding and happiness requires the sixth sense.
Yes. He argues that the fullest measure of that understanding and happiness comes only when you become familiar with and learn to use the sixth sense. That's why it's in the book for those who demand more from life than just financial success. It's about unlocking your total potential.
It really does shift the perspective on the whole book, doesn't it? From wealth strategy to life philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
He suggests rereading this chapter.
He does. He thinks each time you revisit it, especially as you practice the other principles, you'll gain a higher level of insight. It unfolds as you grow.
And the ultimate promise If you develop this, what happens?
Hill paints a picture of gaining real power. The power to just shrug off discouragement, to truly master fear, which, is crucial in what we'll look at next time, to conquer procrastination and to tap into your creative imagination and inspiration almost at will.
Feeling that connection.
Yes, feeling the touch of that unknown something that seems to have guided great people. Reaching a state where transmuting your desires into reality feels almost as straightforward as it once felt to quit when things got tough.
That idea of mastering fear feels like a vital piece of that puzzle.
It really is. And that's exactly where Hill goes next. The following chapter tackles the mastery of fear head-on. He identifies what he calls the 6 basic fears.
The root causes of negativity.
Exactly. Things like indecision, doubt, worry, procrastination. He traces them back to these 6 core fears.
And he calls them ghosts.
6 ghosts of fear, yeah. He insists they only exist in our minds, products of an uncontrolled imagination. But, and this is but he warns they're incredibly dangerous because they can paralyze you just as effectively as any physical threat. He even links the fear of poverty directly to making the Great Depression worse and last longer.
That really highlights their power. So as we wrap up this exploration of Hill's sixth sense and his rather unique invisible counselor's method, here's something to think about. Hill developed this intense inner practice, seeking guidance from figures he admired, and felt it unlocked profound intuition. So for you, the listener, how might cultivating your own focused imagination, maybe deliberately seeking insight from internal counselors representing qualities you need, or admire, how might that unlock capabilities or perspectives you might otherwise miss?
It really makes you question the boundaries, doesn't it, between imagination, intuition, and maybe tapping into something larger. A powerful thought that wisdom might be cultivated just as much from within as sought from without.
Definitely food for thought.
Indeed.